Hey everyone, how are you today? Today's show is a Color of Truth. I'm with my sisters here, the lovely D
Hey, how's everybody doing today?
and the beautiful sister, Miss Letitia.
Hey.
How y'all ladies doing today?
I'm good. I'm trying to figure out how I get to be lovely and not beautiful, but it's all right.
Y'all know y'all beautiful and lovely,
I'm just
sexy
playing
and
with you.
everything. Hey,
I was about
listen,
to say
look
she
over
she
here.
chose violence. Wait a minute.
I
Look at
did. I
sis
chose
over
violence
here
today.
looking so good today. Was she popping on her makeup? Popping on her makeup. I wanted to point that out. I'm sorry, you know.
Oh,
And my sister today in her pearls too. I just want y'all to look at my sister over there with them pearls too. Yeah, some of that.
what's the topic today? What we covering
I'm
today?
sorry. But
Right.
today our topic is I know y'all know I get into it. Y'all know. My bad. Today's topic is childhood trauma. And we all know that childhood trauma is pretty much a serious adverse childhood experience. CDC has we have an ACE test that they actually give out, and it shows that they have 10 altogether, and out of the 10, it is physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical. I'm sorry, mental illness, emotional divorce, substance abuse. Um, so yeah, with those, I'm gonna open the floor up, ladies. Let me know.
Go ahead, Letitia.
See,
Because I'm going to go down a different avenue. I'm going to talk about some passive childhood trauma. So I'm going to go down a different avenue.
I'm just gonna go ahead and skip down this list to number 3.
Okay.
The emotional abuse. Because I don't think that people talk about emotional abuse enough. And I think that especially in our communities, it's not acknowledged enough. Um, you go from it's so many ranges of it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because even now, how many people do you know that their parents will emotionally blackmail them? That's abusive. You know what I mean? Like people who use emotional abuse by triggering people. They know what their triggers are. They hit them buttons. And a lot of times we talk about men doing it to women, or we talk about it in
Mm.
like romantic relationships. But it's these parent-child relationships for me because I find that most times people do not acknowledge their toxic relationships with their parents. The
I
toxic
agree.
behavior that was learned, the toxic behavior that continues. I don't think that people normalize distancing yourself from your toxic parents enough. Like they don't do that enough because we were raised, especially as Christians, if that's what you were raised to honor your mother and your father, but they don't continue on because there's more to that verse. You're
Mhm.
not supposed to aggravate or in the King James version provoke your children. But somehow that's left out. Like I yeah, I'm not with it.
And you know what? You said something that uh, brought up something. I had a conversation with somebody, and we were talking about the whole thing about the child parent relationship. And it's a situation where there's some discord between the parent and the child, and the parent is under the mindset that even though they're the responsible one, they're in the mindset that they feel like because the child is disrespectful, or because maybe the child says some things that may be inappropriate that you would normally say to a parent, that that child is the one who's in the wrong, and that the children automatically have to respect their adults. Now, I'm on the fence with that, because while I agree children should automatically respect their parents, What parents don't realize is that respect can be taken away at any moment in time. So even though as children, you automatically naturally respect your parents, but if anything, there can be so many things that can happen during the course of that relationship that could cause a child to lose respect for a parent. And as the parent in that relationship, whatever happened, there may be a few situations where a child is dead wrong, but for the most part, as the adult in that relationship, you're the responsible party in that relationship. So whatever tension has caused the lack of respect from a child to a parent is responsible for mending that relationship. And enough parents don't do that. They hold grudges against their kids.
Mm-hmm.
If a child does something, they don't view forgiveness the same way that they expect that reciprocation when it comes from their kids. And I have a big issue with that.
I mean, but it's more of the toxicity of feeling like because they're a child that they're supposed to bow down to them. I have a huge issue with the way people yield. Um, I mean, render their parenting anyway, because you just touched on it, like that whole respect thing. Why do you feel like you shouldn't respect your children? Because how else do they learn respect if you're not respecting your children? You
Exactly.
know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Or why are we not addressing what caused the child to want to disrespect you in the first place?
Yes.
But here's the problem: more toxic behavior. They don't recognize what they did to make that child not respect them.
Yes.
You can't treat you can't. So first of all, you're raising children, not cattle. Let's start there. So the notion that you can break another human being is BS. Stop that. Because you're always
True.
going to lock horns. Because people look at me like I'm crazy when I say that my children don't do certain things. But understand that I raise my children in respect. I understand that as a mother, first of all, there's things that I'm not going to do as a mother. Cussing your kid out. There's so many reasons why you shouldn't do that. But I'm going to give you my number one reason. My mother did not cuss at me growing up. And because my mother didn't cuss at me, I wish a grown ass person would curse at me. This woman gave me life and she don't talk to me like that. You can kiss the entire circumference of my ass if you think you want to do it.
I agree.
So because that's my feeling about it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I render
Mm-hmm.
that to my children.
Right. Facts.
Because if mommy respects you,
Mm-hmm.
you tell everybody else to kiss your natural leg ass. We're not doing that here.
Say that again.
And then don't think. And here's the thing: I don't like people talking to my children, but not because I don't think other people can correct them. The way that you talk to your children may not be okay for me because that's not how I speak to my children. You talk at your children. I have dialogue with my children because I understand my job as a parent is to teach them how to
Yes.
communicate. And I can't teach them how to communicate if the conversation doesn't go two ways.
True.
You're always allowed to tell me what gave you displeasure. I need to know that. And I need to be able to tell you whether your disposition is inappropriate or not. Children have feelings. The notion that you don't have a right to they don't have a right to do what? Be human? Because I keep going back to that dialogue. So you won't let the black men be human and feel anything, and you won't let the children be human and feel anything because it doesn't fit into your narrative.
And
So here
what's
we go
funny about that,
with this slave ass mentality,
but for
and
women
y'all
to be
talking
so
about the
emotional, how do you sit up here and frown on your children and your men being in touch with their emotions or being allowed to express themselves with their emotions?
because women do not want to acknowledge their naturally abusive behavior.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. That
Yep,
means we
I'm
gotta
getting ready to
check
start
ourselves. We
texting
gotta
nerves.
check
Fuck it, I'm over.
ourselves. She could check
Um,
herself.
people always talk about narcissistic men. Women are some of the biggest narcissists I've ever seen in my life. Women can be very egocentric, and it's because you're pretty. Nobody told you that the world does not revolve around you.
Ooh, wait a minute.
Because you got a cute face. No one cares. No one cares. That doesn't work
So,
everywhere. You understand what I'm saying? Batting your little eyes did not make you any less toxic than before you were batting your eyes, you crazy broad. I
so I was gonna wait.
inbox my Phoenix Speaks account and say, "Why are you so hard on women?" Women.
Hmm.
I said because it's called accountability. And if I'm not calling out my fellow women, what am I here for? Because
True.
I can't straighten your crown if you don't know what's crooked in the first place.
Girl, you better say it because enough women don't know that. How do you expect to improve as a species or an individual if you're not willing to accept truth and honesty about yourself? If you're not willing to accept constructive criticism, I don't understand it. I just don't get it. But you brought up something, and I was going to wait to get off into this, but let's go ahead and talk about it. So you
Okay.
brought up about women, that whole conversation. So I want to talk about passive forms of childhood because we're all aware of the active forms of childhood. You got the beatings, all the physical abuse, the sexual abuse, those
Verbally
things that,
abused. Yes.
right.
Work on
But
that
there
verbally
are
abuse.
passive, right. There are passive forms of uh, trauma that has lasting impacts on children. And I'm going to say something that's not a very popular opinion, but we're going to go ahead and talk about it. Single motherism is a form of passive childhood trauma. I don't care how you want to look at it. I don't care how you want to view that. This okay, let me rephrase. When I say single motherism, I'm not talking about women who just happen to be single raising children on their own. There are circumstances where every once in a while you may be a single parent. So I'm not talking about the woman who just happened to be a single parent doing the best she can to provide for her children, raise her children, gear them down the right path. I'm talking about the women that applaud, that cheerlead, that actually are sitting up here rooting for single motherism like it's supposed to be some kind of trophy. So the reason why I have a problem with that is because you can go to the CDC website, you can go to the Department of Health and Human Services data, you can look at DOJ data. They are all going to say the same thing. The impacts of fatherlessness, you can't tell me that is nothing but childhood trauma. And it's a passive form because it's not the physical abuse. It's something that you don't necessarily always see right away, but it's definitely childhood trauma. So I got some
Absolutely.
numbers. So according to CDC, Census Bureau, all those the numbers are off by a couple, but the general consensus is the same.
Right.
So for fatherless homes, 63% of youth suicide is made up of children that come from fatherless homes. 63%. Fatherless homes always also account for 90% of homeless or runaway children. It accounts for 86% or 80% of rapists. It accounts for 71% of high school dropouts. Fatherlessness, children that grow up in fatherless homes accounts for 70% of youth that are in state operated institutions. Fatherlessness also attributes to 71% of pregnant teens. It attributes 90% of adolescent arsonists and 75% of adolescents uh, uh, chemical abuse. So there are so many negative impacts that come with fatherlessness. And I get it. I understand some men just aren't around. Every woman is not a single mother because she just happens to push the father away, but so many are. There are so many children out here. And okay, even in a failed relationship. So whether you're married or not, the husband, you've gotten a divorce, you're no longer living together. So of course, since you're not living together, the child is going to live with one of the parents. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be with the mother, it's going to be the custodial parent. There are so many of those situations where those mothers will sit up there and they will badmouth the father in front of the child. They will call the father and cuss him out, have crazy conversations in front of the child. They're engaging in adult activities that children should not be around. Speaking of adult activity, the women on TikTok that are twerking in front of their 3, 4, 5, and 6-year-old little boys, childhood trauma. Because what do you think is going to happen? So you got a group of women right now that are complaining about how hard good men are to find, right? And these are 30-year-old women. So according to the CDC data, single motherism has been on the rise for 50 years. So for 50 years, more and more women are having sole custody of their children. So if you're 30 years old and you're trying to figure out why there are no good men around and asking yourself who's raising these ingrates that want to call themselves men, single motherism is raising these ingrates. So if we're going to talk about childhood trauma, we got to talk about how childhood trauma that stems from this mentality that we should high five single motherism. And yes, you can high five any woman that is doing for herself, that is stepping up, taking care of her kids, providing for them. That is always to be commended, whether it's a single mother or a single father. It's always to be commended. But at the same time, how much accolades do you expect to get for being a parent? But you take pride in bad mouthing your children's father. You take pride in alienating your children's father. You take pride in keeping your children away from not only the father, but his other side of the family as well. And as humans, we naturally want to bond with people. We're emotional people. We like to connect. That's why there's so many mental issues going on right now because of COVID. That was one of the major impacts of COVID. Everybody, stuck in the house, not being able to socialize. We're social creatures. So when you automatically eliminate 50% of a child's DNA from their existence, or you try to push that side of them away from them, anytime you talk negatively about the other parent, how do you know that that child is not looking at that and saying, man, my father, my mother is 50% me. I am my father's child. So for you to talk about my father in a negative light, how many children are actually regurgitating that and having that reflect on themselves into adulthood? Or the women that go around saying, you get on my nerves, you look just like your stupid ass daddy, stuff like that. What do you think that actually does to a child? But you're
Mhm,
so concerned with hating the biological father of
mhm,
the child that you don't
mhm.
understand the negative impacts you're having on the child.
Bad mouthing any parent in the mix is an
Right.
issue. It doesn't necessarily mean mom, dad, but so bad mouthing, we got to cut that out. Stop calling the kids out there. Stop. Listen, we got a list. Get a piece of paper, get a pen, write it down. Let's go. I'm just saying.
I need to round out these comments. We got to circle back to the round because, of course, I agree with you, D. However, all of these broads run in the same path.
Find new friends, people. Find new friends. Find a bigger circle. If your people is talking about this,
Here's a problem, especially when you get into women between the ages of 30 and 50. There is a pattern of single women at the top that are the matriarchs, and then they men bashed, right? So their daughters were getting in relationships with men, but they were not respectful relationships.
hmm
You always got that auntie that will wow your ass out, and your uncle just sit quietly and take it, and then the generation behind them learns the behavior. I speak on that because again, we're talking about childhood trauma. You are ingraining that into your children. You're ingraining that into your daughters. You're ingraining that into your sons. That's acceptable behavior. And then we keep in this nasty cycle. Because if you go to my website, I did a whole series on generational curses and abuse and toxicity. And this is where it starts. Childhood trauma, the things that you don't think are traumatic are very detrimental. They carry on through one's life. And then on top of that, when you get to be an adult and you don't recognize that those things are actually trauma because you desensitize that person from what is not right. So, example, I grew up in Baltimore City, which is very urban. Accent fathers everywhere. But my core group of friends, all of us came from two-parent households. So as I branched off from those friends going into college, people were utterly shocked when they found out I came from a two-parent household. But then the men that were dating me said it made sense. you have feminine energy. Yeah, because my daddy ran our house. Everything went through my daddy. Like my mother was a stay-at-home mother for the most part, right? My brother was autistic, so my mom only worked weekends when my dad was home. I watched my parents function semi-toxic because their asses can't get along. But the core of it was traditional. Grandparents married, aunts and uncles married. I grew up around a whole bunch of married people. So when I had my oldest son, my cousin, she had a baby, and he said to her, "Where's your husband?" And everybody looked at my child like my child was crazy, but we keep normalizing things that aren't normal. When you talk about having, especially in the Black community, these houses that are led by women with absent men, that is indicative of slavery.
You better say it.
They took our men, sold them off, and then women became the head of their household.
And
Now,
how many in the Black community are still suffering from the effects of that?
exactly. And let me tell you how jacked up y'all are in your thought processes. Now the narrative is women are supposed to lead the household anyway, even with men present. But how do you figure that if men are supposed to be the protectors?
Right.
Because if you take it down to just, let's go to the animal kingdom. Lions, there's one man, there's several women. The women hunt, but if some shit go down, it's not the women that go out and fight, despite them being the hunters for the food. Y'all keep going against the natural order of life, of nature, and then telling people that that's right. You are fucked up in the head. Because I'm not gonna have no cut cards tonight, y'all. It's too important. I'm not
Right.
gonna have no cut cards tonight because it's way too important. Stop feeding your daughter you don't need a man, because Miss D said it. We are naturally social creatures. So stop perpetuating that. You needing a partner is natural, just like fucking breathing. You needing a partner is just like shedding tears. It's just like having fear. You need a partner. Now we want to get into the why. That's a different conversation. But you need a partner. Because theoretically, we were made in pairs anyway. Because where the fuck did monogamy come from? And then for all of you who are poly, you still require a partner. People who are single are lonely. They're prone to depression and anxiety and prone to suicide. That's not by accident. Stop going against the grain and telling people that it's natural for you to be single, that it's natural for you not to need a partner, and it's natural to tear down men. That doesn't work anywhere. It doesn't work. You needed him to fertilize the damn egg. Why do you think you don't need him beyond that?
Amen. Amen. I feel
Just
you.
because y'all got cute and started using turkey bases and shit doesn't mean you don't. Yes, I said it. I said it.
Not the turkey basters.
Yes, she did. She's so crazy. She's
Listen,
so
I
rude.
told you I wasn't going to use no cuckoos. I listen for those who have chose alternative lifestyles and didn't want the dude to touch them.
Okay. Okay.
Apparently, it works.
It
But
works.
my point
Hey,
is,
who was that? Who was that celebrity that somebody was trying to siphon their sperm out of the condom? Was that Drake? Turkey baster.
I can't remember.
I don't remember. I
Girl,
think it was Drake though.
I
But yeah,
can't
that's a
remember who
turkey
it
baster
was, but
situation.
he was hot
listen,
sauce.
that
He
sounds
was
like some
hot sauce in the
childhood trauma.
condom. Is that what you talking about, D? The one that put
Huh?
hot sauce in the
The
condom?
hot sauce,
And the
yeah, the
girl,
hot sauce.
I can't remember who did it. Oh, Anissa got wide-eyed. Anissa, you should know this, because if I know this and I be way unplugged for celebrities,
Oh my God.
Yeah, Anita, you should know this.
the, the point I'm making is, when you talk about single mothers, that is a trauma of itself. That is a generational curse. Thank you, Kimmy. That is a childhood trauma. It's a generational curse, and which brings me to my next point. Generational curses are a form of abuse and childhood trauma. Stop passing that shit to kids.
Right.
Stop giving them bullshit that they don't need in place of what they need.
So
Okay, so let me spit out some statistics, some other statistics real quick, if y'all don't mind, ladies, while we, going all in. Since we're talking about it, you were right, absolutely right. 2 times more likely to develop depression, 3 times more likely to develop the anxiety disorders, and that's what we keep doing. What with our kids? We having people label the kids with all these what, and then say, oh, they need to be put on medication because Ray can't sit down, and we got to give them more
But that's the
medication.
problem. They're not
But we don't
that's
realize that.
another issue. The
they're not
medication we're hopping
labeling.
our kids on.
They're not
Okay,
labeling. They're misdiagnosing.
because of why.
Let's be clear. They're not labeling. They're misdiagnosing. And let me explain to you why these children are being misdiagnosed. Because in the Black community, we refuse to acknowledge mental health.
True.
And instead of getting it done right, you're telling people that your child has anger and aggression issues instead of recognizing it for what it is. Let's get down to the nitty gritty because I ain't come to play tonight.
That's what I'm saying.
So
Go
instead
ahead.
of telling people that your child is angry and aggressive, do you understand that anger is a telltale sign of anxiety? When your kid is mean as fuck, it's a telltale sign of anxiety. And instead of treating the anxiety, you go to the primary care provider who is treating the symptom that you gave them, which is anger and aggression, which falls into what? ADHD.
Right.
Instead
Amen.
of taking your child to a therapist
Right.
There you go. Say it
and
again.
having a therapist refer them to a psychiatrist that can
Come on.
properly diagnose what's going on with your kids. Because
Come on.
here's the thing, y'all didn't want to say that Uncle Willie was schizophrenic. Do you understand that schizophrenia that's a hereditary disease?
Mm-hmm.
It's typical in men. It has a tendency to skip a generation. Because tell the truth and shame the devil. Y'all not gonna sit up here and bullshit me tonight. We're not here for that. So instead of going, and I don't want to label my child, but you did, because you let them put ADHD on your kid, but you didn't want to give them depression. Because
Hello.
depression is the silent killer. And you set your child up when you do not have your children properly diagnosed, they cannot develop proper coping mechanisms. And then you send them out into the world ill prepared.
Come on
And
now.
is that yours?
But what about the parents who just take their children to get diagnosed because they're a little energetic instead of putting them in karate classes or letting them engage in some sports, letting them actually burn off some energy as opposed to he won't sit down, he needs to be on Ritalin.
Hello.
Yeah, because here's the thing. Do you know what? Like you said, karate class, but physical activity might not burn your head out.
True.
Because you have a child that has a mind that's constantly working. You're not going to burn them out with physical activity. You have to burn out their mind so they'll go to sleep and shut down.
But we're not engaging with our kids. We're sitting them in front of iPhones and televisions and letting those raise our children. So half the time, I don't even believe parents actually know their kids. And matter of fact, speaking of which, somebody posted something today, and somebody made a comment that they felt like whoopings were lazy parenting. And while I agree with a portion of their sentiment, because they said, anytime that, all you want to do is whip a child, you don't want to take the necessary steps to figure out more productive ways or constructive ways to discipline a child. While I agree with that in portion, I will say some kids need their little behinds tapped
Yeah,
every once in a while. But however, my
I'm
thing is
not
this.
against it.
I don't think whoopings in and of themselves are lazy parenting. However, I do agree that it's lazy parenting when that's the only method of punishment that you utilize and you don't understand your children and what they respond to. So like for me, I grew up a brother and a sister, so 3 of us in the house. all of us didn't respond to the same thing. My sister, if you wanted to punish her, you had to put her outside. My sister didn't like to go outside. She didn't want to be outside. She was always a homebody. For me, it was my freedoms being taken away. I didn't respond to whippings. I got plenty and they were well deserved. But I didn't respond to that because I was always a kid that I'm gonna wipe these little tears. I'm gonna be right back outside playing. So I didn't respond to that. And when my mother realized that about me, she actually stopped the whippings and said, okay, it's time for the punishment. It's time to start taking away some things out of the room, time to start limiting your access to certain things. That's what I responded to. So while I don't necessarily agree that that's lazy parenting, but if that's the only parenting that you do, if every time they do something that you don't think is appropriate, the first thing you do is pull out a belt, I agree that's lazy parenting and it's abusive
I would
because
kick
everything
you.
doesn't warrant a whooping.
Yep.
I would
Because
kick
that's
you.
like corporal, like that's always corporal punishment.
Right.
Absolutely.
I'm fighting babies. I would,
You so silly.
but all jokes aside, I agree with you because I didn't get spanked much as a child, but I didn't do much as a child either, right? I got a slick mouth. Like this slick mouth that you're getting as I'm sitting here with you, that was the extent of what Letitia was going to do because I have a theory that I developed early in life. I'm not doing no crime I don't want to pay for.
Facts.
And wow, my mother would put her hands on you. My mother's a talker. And if anybody who knows me, don't talk me to death. My mother will explain to me why I'm getting punished, and that in itself was like torture to me. Just tell me I'm grounded, send me to my damn room, take my stuff. Please don't talk to me. Don't ask me no questions. I really need to sit down and work that out in therapy because I'm still like that. Stop talking to me. I work from home. But you're right. Children don't respond to the same things. One of the best things that I picked up from my mother's parenting was what your mom did. You can't raise children the same way. There's no.
Yep.
Might need to teach me how to raise this dog because he's terrible. He's treacherous. All of my children are. Here's the thing, because I keep telling people I put my hands on children, but I don't know last time I touched the kid because my children are docile in nature. So if you're just joining, I got a rack of kids starting 5, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. My 18-year-old was the okie doke kid. He's way too good. I'm thinking that he might be a sociopath because he's a very good boy. Nobody should be that good, right? If I say, even at 18, if I say to him, I'm very disappointed in you, his eyes will still well up. My 16-year-old, though, he is me with a double dose of testosterone. That boy he is hot-headed and he always put his toe over the line. So my mother was like, finally, you got one like you. That's the one I get along with the most. Because I be with the shit too.
That is so odd. Most parents who have a kid that is similar to them or acts like them, they butt heads all the time.
We do not butt heads at all. Him and his father bump heads, but look, me and his father are divorced, so that should tell you something right
Now
there.
think about that, right?
Me and Alex don't bump heads, but I understand who he is as a person because I lend a lot of grace, and he gets a lot of wiggle room. I said, look, I understand that you an asshole because that's the first conversation I had with people. Like his teacher, she was like, he can just be so difficult. Yeah, my kid's an asshole all the time. And she looked appalled. I know who my children are. And I give him enough room to be that little asshole, but you gotta do it within reason, Alexander. You gotta be an asshole because I can't. What am I going to do? Beat it out of him? Like I can't work that out of him. That's like
Right.
That might be a gene because we're all now the rest of them. You gotta pull it out of him, not him. I'm surprised.
But see, that's another thing. A lot of parents don't know the difference between a character trait and misbehaving. So that's another issue.
Yeah, that's his
But I
character
want
trait,
to.
like,
But I want to talk about the comment that Eric put up about what about the kids who don't respond to anything. So there are kids that don't respond to whoopings. They don't respond to liberties being taken away. I agree. But that's when, as parents, you've got to learn how to outsmart your kids. How
Yes.
do you let?
Kids that don't respond to anything, they are responding to something. And
Right.
usually they're responding to your reaction. Because
Right.
when you start talking about children who don't respond to anything, you're usually a frustrated parent. Now, this is not an attack, but usually that's what's happening. It's a frustrated parent. Which, going back to Alexander, here's the contrast. So with me, okay, have at it, Alex. Is my disposition. But with his father, he get the yelling and hollering. Bruh, hang yourself. I got all day. Once he saw that that was my disposition, things started to change a little bit. He was like, so that's what she doing? Yeah. Because
But
what
that
you
goes
have to
back.
do, huh?
That goes back to learning your kids, actually spending a time parenting your children and learning, because some kids, so for that comment, I feel like some kids respond to what I like to call lessons. Something happens, whether they acted out of place, whether they did something they shouldn't have, they got involved in a situation they shouldn't have gotten involved in. Regardless of what that is, every situation doesn't warrant a whipping. Every situation doesn't warrant time off or standing in the corner or whatever the case may be. Sometimes you have to sit down and just have a conversation with the child about their actions and the
Mm-hmm.
repercussions of those actions.
Sometimes I'm not even going to do that. So Alex got in trouble right before the pandemic. He got suspended. I walked in today. I asked him what happened. I said, you need to explain it to me before any of these grown folks do. I listened. They told me their side of it. We went home. I put my briefcase down. I said, I have work to do. I went into my office and he followed me like a little puppy. And he's just standing there looking at me. I said, why are you looking at me? Are we going to talk about it? Absolutely not. I don't want to talk about it. And like he was just looking at me stunned. I said, do you want to talk about it? He said, shouldn't we? Call your father. I don't want to talk about it. He walked around for a whole week before I acknowledged that incident. I said, so what do you want to talk about? And he's just looking at me like,
Oh.
because you have to understand. Some kids you have to hate. Guerrilla warfare. It's a battle of the minds. You got to play chess with some children. And I understood that if I ignored him, one, it put him on pins and needles.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
live wired as a parent. I can be a live wire. I'm like, I'm not giving that attention, Alexander. You already know you're wrong. So you reconcile that with yourself and let me know what you come up with. When I tell you that child was looking at me like I was crazy, he stayed in his room. My oldest son was like, is he punished? I said, I didn't say anything to your brother. He had punished himself
Oh, poor baby.
for a week. He was
You
like,
done put him through a whole childhood
didn't know
experience.
what to do, right? Because you have to understand that when you are raising your children right, it'll come to them.
Mm-hmm.
But then you
Absolutely.
also have to understand what your role is as a parent because he's 16 now. My role as mommy is guiding. I can't make you do anything. And I know somebody is thinking to themselves, I wish I would. You can't make a child do anything.
You can't make another individual do anything, regardless of the age.
You can't make a child do anything. It is not that you made your child respect you. It is that you taught your child to respect you and they reciprocated. Because you can't make them do anything. And I had 3 teenage boys. My oldest are boys. First of all, they're all bigger than me and they're all stronger than me. But I know damn well they wouldn't be froggy in here. But that's years of raising, teaching respect, teaching boundaries, understanding that they're human. And all of these things circle back to that trauma we were talking about. If you think that you're raising children contrary to teaching respect and guidance, you may want to reevaluate how you're raising your children because it sounds like control. And control and abuse sit in the same bucket. because I have control over my household, but I'm not rearing anything by fear. They may fear consequences, but they don't fear me.
Right, right,
They don't
right.
fear me.
I respect my mother. I wouldn't put
Mm-hmm.
my hands on her, not because I'm afraid of her, because I respect her.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
know she'll also. There's a tad bit of fear.
Yeah, I'm a little off. Like
Tad
I said,
bit of fear.
at the beginning of this conversation, I said I will fuck up a kid. I'm a little off.
Yeah, but
Hey,
But
it's
hey,
there's so
Sister
much
it's
you
it's
got to
Roxy.
do
literally
to push
respect.
me over the edge, Because I don't even remember last time I truly disciplined anybody in my house. That's not what happened. First of all, they don't leave me alone. Like I'm waiting for the stage that comes when your kids don't like you and they avoid you. I haven't got there. I want them out of my room. They be there. I go to bed. They're still there. Like,
Not they still there. Don't
don't
do
like
that.
me. And I
They'll
my
get to that one day.
all their friends are scared of me. It's weird.
That's a good thing. No sleepovers, no.
Huh?
I say that's good. That's a good thing sometimes. No sleepovers, no. Hey,
No
hey,
sleep.
Sister Roxy.
Girl, please. My house always full.
Empty it out. Get
There's
out.
no there's no beauty. Girl, please.
Hey, matter of fact, I wanted to say something for Roxy. So we've touched on different kinds of abuse. So let's talk about the sexual abuse that children experience. So
Okay.
1 in 5 girls and I think 1 in 20 boys experience some form of sexual abuse growing up in their homes, and oftentimes via their parents or close family member or uncle, whether it's a real biological uncle or just that uncle that be coming by paying bills sometimes. But a lot of children experience some form of sexual abuse in the home. And
I
to me,
challenged the 1 in 20, by the way.
Hmm.
say what?
I challenged that 1 in 20 number.
Oh, absolutely, because boy,
Because
it's
you
not
know why
reported in
that's one
boys.
in 20.
Those are
It's not reported
recorded.
in boys as often as it is in girls. Absolutely. And it's not even reported in girls most of the time.
Yeah.
Period.
We def-
So for me, the remnants or the impacts of sexual trauma from a
mhm.
parent, from a close family member, or any adult in that manner is it the impacts of that can be lifelong, and they can alter lots of things, especially when you get to the point where there is pregnancy involved. And sometimes, of course, when it's family members, that leads to situations where we're having abortions. And every once in a while, abortions lead to you may not be able to reproduce kids again in the future in your adult life. And those things leave lasting impressions on people, negative impressions. They impact who you seek as a partner as you grow up, whether or not you're comfortable in your sexual adulthood, whether or not you develop, I guess, a desire for a sexual partner. But my concern would be the adults who engage in those type of sexually abusing children. And one thing that bothered me is, like, for instance, California. I don't know if they actually passed the law, but I know it was brought up either about a year ago or a year and a half ago, where they were actually considering lowering not necessarily the age of consent, but there was a bill where they were actually talking about when it comes to statutory rape situations, where as long as there was a 10-year or less difference in age gap, then the judge had the freedom to lessen the charge. And it just puzzled me that I feel like they're trying to normalize pedophilia, um, because you have a lot of groups now that are considering pedophilia as a sexual preference and not an illness or a sickness or whatever you want to call it. But Callie was actually looking into changing that to where if there's a 10-year difference, you could have a lesser charge. And I don't understand how a bunch of grown-ups can sit around in a room, in a boardroom, or whether it's a meeting or whatever, and actually have a discussion about if a child is 13 years old and their sexual predator happens to be 23. Oh, that's not that big of a deal because it was a 10-year difference, not understanding or not even caring so much about what that does to that child or what kind of impact that's going to have on that child's life into adulthood. So, Roxy, since you just joining us, what's your take on that?
Um, so that's very frustrating. As as an adult who was an abused child, um, the whole conversation it brings up a lot of trauma. Um, you know, and I seen earlier that you had touched upon, how therapy is not something that's usually tolerated in our community, but it's something that's necessary in order for us to be able to get through that kind of stuff. And if you're a 13-year-old child that's being touched by an adult, period, it's going to have long lasting effects on you. And then it'll have effects on the people that you come in contact with as well. So relationships that you have when you're younger, they tend to have a bearing on how you relate and how you treat other people later on in life. I know that 13 is a normal age for some people overseas, out of town, and other places, other countries. They used to get married at that age. So they used to think that that was something that was normal. But to me, in our society in this day and age, I don't think that it's appropriate for anybody that's underage to date anybody else that's not of their age, because you're taught things that you may not be age ready for. A 23-year-old man knows way, way more about sex than a 15-year-old girl, a 18-year-old girl. So I think that sexual abuse in itself is very traumatizing. It determines the way that you respond to sex. Some people who are sexually abused tend to not want to engage in sexual relations at all. It puts the trauma on it. You start looking at everybody else strange. You don't want to have a relationship with other people. Um, it it causes you to be overly sexual. You may
True.
look at it as a way to love someone, as a way to form a bond. You start looking at sex in a negative light, and it's not supposed to be that way. Leaning on a partner, thinking that sex is the way that somebody shows you their affection.
or
So,
dismisses the affection, because that's the other side of that. There is no connect. Sex doesn't form a bond or connection.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Let
so
me
true.
let me insert real quick here, because Eric said help the babies, keep them safe, limit the uncles. Can we stop saying that only, and can we normalize that women sexually abuse children?
Absolutely.
Because there are too many instances where we are only looking at sexually abused young ladies, and the number is something like 1 in 4 children are sexually abused, and it does not incorporate young males. And
Mm-hmm.
it's been my experience in adulthood that women abuse young men, and when they get an older woman, it's applauded. And for some men, later on in their life, they reflect back on that and realize that they were victimized and can't say that to somebody.
Hmm.
So
Matter
we
of
need
fact,
to
there's a
normalize,
story. There's a
right?
there's a story about a teacher who got messing around with a student. She ended up getting pregnant. Of course, he was underage. She had the baby. Do you know that when he became of age, do you know she put him on child support? And do you know he was ordered to pay child support? Now, that was a situation where statutory rape was the case. She happened to get pregnant as a teacher, having an affair with a student, and a judge actually ordered him to pay child support for that. Do you know what kind of mental trauma impact that could have on an individual, where you're forcing somebody in a court of a law, you're punishing them for being sexually abused as a child?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Something wrong with that. Big time.
But there's so many variables. You know what I'm saying? There's so many variables. So I was talking to a friend the other day. He was telling me that he was sexually abused by his babysitter. And he said that he was like 29, 30 years old when he got married, and he disclosed to his wife that that happened to him. because marriage, you're supposed to be in a safe space with your spouse. And she said to him, "Why are you crying like a baby about it?" Sexual trauma
What?
impacts you in such a way.
Hold on. She said, "What? Why are you crying?" Say it one more time.
Why are you acting like a baby? Why are you crying about it?
Wow.
Again, we take these situations
Wow.
with men and we minimize them.
Is it before or at? Was this the before I do's or was this,
It was
I
after.
know, my bad. I know. I was
Yeah,
just,
yeah, it was after that.
But that
So,
goes back to what I said on another conversation that we were having about how can women be so emotional, but yet and still you don't teach your boys to be in touch with their emotions. Now they don't have to act on them, but they need to be in touch with them. But when you become an adult, you don't understand why your man doesn't know how to have an emotional conversation with you.
mm-hmm.
but it goes back to women also not offering a safe place for men because we just said
Yep.
that he was sexually abused, and she took your man because here's the thing. Sexual abuse is very tricky with men, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because it makes sense, but somebody's gonna go, just because his penis responded does not mean he wanted it. That is a physical response. Just because his penis got erect does not mean that's an emotional response. That
That's
is
the
a
same thing when
physical
it
response.
comes to women. That's the same thing when it comes to a
Sometimes
lot of women.
it is. Sometimes it is an emotional response. But you assume that he wants it because it's erect. So is a man to assume that a woman wants it because her vagina is moist?
That's exactly what a lot of.
Because the pendulum has to swing both ways. And in this society, we don't allow it to. Because we need to
That's
normalize
because
these conversations about women being predators. Because when I first started speaking, I was
Mhm.
going into how egocentric women are.
Mm,
And just like with men and little girls, you want it. The woman said it to the male.
mm-hmm.
You want it.
But sex amongst men is more normalized anyway. So a man is supposed to be like the the sexual, the aggressor, the like you said, that's why when women see a man and he's erect, they assume that he wants it because
But it
sex
goes
is
back to
supposed to be
that comment you just made that men are more sexual, and I don't agree.
I
yeah.
don't agree either.
That's
I
true.
don't agree with that at all. I believe that women tend to be more sexual creatures, but our society makes us
That part.
closeted. Because here's the thing: if women weren't sexual, if you telling me every teenage mother was taught coerced into sex, you telling me
No,
every teenage
because
mother was
I
coerced
know plenty
because
of women.
that's what the theory is, right? I
Mhm.
sat there and had a conversation with my grandmother about 8 years ago. My grandfather is deceased. He's on my wrist. I'm talking to my grandmother. My grandmother said to me and your grandfather wasn't supposed to be together. I got pregnant and they made us get married. My grandfather tells a different story. My grandfather said that they were in love. My grandmother said she just wanted some sex. She wanted to see what it was about. And when I tell y'all, my grandfather was beat red when I said it. He was like, "That's not what happened. I was in love with her." He's like, "Look, bro." She said she was after the pickle. Like,
Oh, you so childish. She was after the pickle, Papa.
girl, that's what she said to me. That's what she said to me. My grandmother's off the hook. But that's a prime example of
Another
women
childhood
hunting
trauma.
because we
But
don't want to acknowledge that women are hunters.
that
Well, let's
part.
tackle
We
the other side
always
of
paint
that.
the picture like men are predators, but
Let's
women aren't.
let's tackle the other side of that. So you talked about the females being predators, right? So I know a girl who was traumatized by a parent trying to protect the child. So this was a girl and a boy. They were engaged in sexual relationships. Now she was right under the age of consent. He was like right over. So even though it was a statutory situation, there was literally like a year, maybe a year and a half difference between the two. So they were both willing participants. There was no question about that. She was a willing participant. He was a willing participant. However, there was the issue was he was black, she was white. So when she got pregnant, her parents were they were out. I mean, they just couldn't believe it. It was bad enough she was pregnant. When they found out she was pregnant by a black guy, that's where the problem started. So they immediately went into I've got to protect my child mode. So all of a sudden, when they found out he was a year and a half older than her, then there was oh, this must have been statutory rape. There's no way my child could have done this. There's no way that she volunteered for this. This had to be a statutory situation. So, of course, the child, not wanting to make her parents upset, growing up in the household where there's this distaste for other races. So she goes along to get along with the story. The guy gets into some trouble with the law because of the accusation, and now she's stuck dealing with the fact that she can't believe that she caused him to get a criminal record because she wouldn't stand up to her parents, but she was a child. And her
Right,
parents were
exactly.
basically forcing her to make this about a statutory situation when she was more than a willing participant. So you have the situations where parents want to act like they're protecting their children and don't understand the kind of damage that they're causing them as well, because you want to make them out to be the saints. No different from the child that's acting up in school when the parent calls the parent. Half of these parents run down to their school say, "My child wouldn't do that." You blah blah blah. But
Yes, yes.
as soon as COVID happened, everybody had to homeschool. What did every parent, every
They was
world's
ready to
greatest
get
mom,
rid of them kids. Like, wait a
world's
minute, take them
greatest
kids
mom,
back. Y'all the
right?
world greatest teachers. Wait a minute, come
World's
get your.
greatest mom found out that her child was a demon in school because now you with them 24 hours a day, because the home child is never the same as the away from home child. Those are two different kids. And what people don't really, not only are they two different kids because you're away from your parental supervision, so you're a
Hmm.
little more loose with your decision making, or
Yes, little Johnny.
you know what I'm saying. But it's not just that. It's also the fact that what they don't realize about home and school is when a child is at home, that child has a less structured lifestyle. Not less structured because there aren't rules at home, but because when you're in school, you're sitting at a desk for 8 hours.
Hmm.
You have to raise your hand before you speak.
Hmm.
You have to ask to go to the bathroom. You
Follow
don't have to
directions.
engage in
Yep.
none of those activities at home. So at home, the child doesn't have to ask to go to the bathroom. They can go in the refrigerator and get some water. They don't have to ask for these liberties. So it's easier to act up at school because this child who's not accustomed to sitting still for 8 hours may be getting a little antsy, maybe getting a little anxious. And so now you're seeing that person at home now that is supposed to be sitting down, you know what I'm saying, paying attention to the computer screen. Now you're seeing that child for what the school saw in them. And now all of a sudden, oh my God, I respect teachers so much now. But you was the same person running down to the school talking about not my kid. And allowing your children to be miscreants is another form of abuse. Allowing your children to never deal with any consequences of their actions, to never address any wrongdoings. You don't, like I said, you don't have to resort to the whoopings, but never addressing any wrongdoing, always painting them out to be some kind of saint. That's another form of child abuse. Because you're raising ungrateful little snots that grow up thinking that everybody's supposed to gimme, 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 and they're entitled. And
And
the
in school,
world
it ain't
doesn't
like
work like
that.
that.
Definitely not in
Right.
school. Like, we got too many kids. Not in school. I need y'all to stop.
Miss one though.
Yes, I know.
Miss
I'm a
one. Because some of y'all don't tell your little children no.
That's true
period.
too.
Y'all don't tell your kids
The
no.
simple thing of telling children no. It's
Yes.
not about I won't give you. You have to make them understand that sometimes it just has to be a no.
For
And
no
Yes.
it's
reason.
okay not to
For
Sometimes,
no
know.
reason.
When they don't hear no, they don't know how to react to no. So it may not even be that child is misbehaving. If you've never been told no,
No. You don't know how to act
you're
when you hear
feeling
it.
rejected. And then that's a whole new emotion that they're dealing with in an environment that's not the comfort of you.
But
So we get meltdowns.
there's some kids that are told no, and they do what they want to do anyway, and the parent don't do nothing about it. So it's
That
a whole
part, I
nother
need
problem.
more. I need some help. What'd you
It
say?
goes
Go
back to
ahead.
accountability, because like Dee said, lack of accountability, not teaching that skill was abuse.
Yes.
Because here's the thing. If you are not teaching your children how to be productive humans,
Citizens.
decent humans, and you send them out in the world, you have abused your child. Because what you did was set them up for failure. You set
For
them
them
up
to
for
be in
failure,
two places.
and let's pull it in, especially when they brown babies. When you do not give your children the fundamentals that they require to get on in this life, that is abuse.
You're right. We had that conversation too. They were asking, what is the appropriate age to put your children out? And I said that to me, it's not about an age, but what as a parent have you instilled in your children to prepare them for the outside world? And until you have done that, no age is appropriate to put them out, because that's your role as a parent, to prepare them for adult life, to prepare them for being on their own, to prepare them for being responsible, going to work, being a member of society, a contributing member of society, a functioning adult. That is your role as a parent. So if you're not instilling any values in them, that's a form of abuse to me.
Amen.
But
Yes,
here's the
it
thing,
is.
D, because you know this is my infamous line. If the human brain doesn't finish developing until you're 25, why are you putting your kids out at 18?
If you haven't went through that accountability and consequences, I know that's right, Eric.
People out that have not fully developed their brains. Because Dee touched on values and morals, right? But you are just as negligent and just as abusive if you are not learning the things, because we talk about finances all the time, right? And we talk about how our parents didn't teach us. But how many of you ignorant bastards learned it to teach it to your children instead of passing the bad habit that your mama and your daddy gave you?
Break the cycle.
About generational curses, right?
Break the cycle.
So if you're not doing the things that you need to do to better yourself, if you don't look at yourself and say, I'm a good human, I'm well-rounded, I'm happy with who I am right now, please stop fucking.
But there's some people that don't think that there's nothing wrong with that.
That's true.
There you go. True. There you go. It's so many elements to this, and we
back to accountability,
emotional abuse part, and we talked about sexual abuse a little bit. But here's the thing, guys: there are so many things in being a parent. There's so many moving parts, and everybody underestimates the job, or everybody overestimates the simple fundamentals of the job. The job is real simple. You get them from point A to point B, and you pour in. You do not get them from point A to point B with the iPad in their hand, though. Because then they're absorbing trash.
I mean, but what are you pouring in, though?
Exactly. You're not putting nothing in.
What are you pouring in?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I know a lot of parents that
you're absolutely right.
They think that just because they had a child or are a parent, that makes them a good parent. Or I did this and I did that. I bought you some Jordans and I took care of you and I made sure you was clean, your hair was cut, and that don't necessarily make you a parent.
Basic human need.
Did you teach them ABC?
That's what you did.
Like, did you teach them how to tie the shoes? Did you teach them the basic things that they needed in order to be able to survive?
Did you
Girl,
teach your
these
kid how
single
to
mamas
spell their
too busy
name
twerking.
correctly?
They
Did
too
you
busy
teach your
twerking it on
kids how to
OnlyFans.
spell their middle name
Y'all,
as well? Like when you give your
y'all
kids
so
these
far ahead
names,
of
I need
me.
you guys to remember that these kids need to spell their names. They need to spell their
Listen,
names. That
can
Right.
we
means
stop
all the
naming
letters
our
that you
children?
put in there, they spell them. They got
Can
to
we
spell
stop
Right.
all
naming
of
our
that.
children
Y'all so far
Alabama
ahead of me.
Quisha? Can we stop naming our kids Alabama Quisha and all this old nonsense that they can't smell till they spell till they 7.5 years old?
That I
No,
can't
they're
pronounce
not
when I
even
see it.
7.5. The kids need to learn how to spell their names. So I'm just saying, I'm not knocking no one for their names. Every name is very unique. My name is very unique in itself. Everyone assumes this should be an I and it should be an S and all this. I understand. I'm not knocking you, but
But
just
hold
make
on.
sure your child knows how to spell
But hold on.
and put
All
in
of us
every
grew up,
letter.
right? We all grew up, right? We all went to school. You know how vicious children are.
It's
Children will
not the
find
children
any.
part.
You're right. You're right. But children will find anything to nitpick about. So when you give your children these bizarre names, they're
She
going
said
to
bizarre.
get picked on in school. And while that may not be your fault, they're going to get picked on in school
There's a
because
lot of kids that's not
that's
getting
what we
picked on
do.
because it's so a commonly it's a commonality
Huh?
of different types of names. So no, these kids aren't getting picked on for names. They just got all different commonality of they got different
But
I
what I'm
think
names.
it's
saying
So
is
about
you
perspective.
know,
they're
We can
looking for
debate the
things.
truth across the board.
Listen.
Because if you want me to keep it 100, this Letitia fiasco that's going on,
stop it.
I I hate it. And I'm gonna explain to you why. I do not like being identified on paper, and I'm a corporate chick. I don't like it. Because how many white Letitias are you going to see walking around?
That's true.
And then let me break it down because my mother was a teen mother, and I know she watching. She gonna cuss at me. That's Letitia.
Don't do her.
See, because this is what I'm talking about. Don't
I
do
gotta give you the eyebrow.
it. Give me the eyebrow all you want,
Mhm.
but I know how to read and write. My English is pretty decent. I understand Latin root words. That's Letitia. Letitia
I
is
mean,
Leticia.
You don't tell me what your mama said. I know what your
I
mama.
listen, and that's and that in itself, it goes back into the things that I have conversations about because Everett, Alexander, Ethan, Ashlyn, and Elise, because the girls they got a little eccentric because that was as eccentric as I was gonna get. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
D makes an excellent point. Kids can be vicious, but we talking about moving forward.
Yeah,
listen.
because you will be
We're,
racially,
we're,
you
we're
will
we're
be
talking about moving
profiled
forward,
on a
and it's
job
your
application.
choice.
You're going to be
That's what I'm
profiled.
saying.
Your choice is whatever your choice is, but understand that your choice has impact. Understanding that words have power because I tell people watch your language when you're talking to me, and I don't mean your profanity. Watch your language when you're talking to me. So when we're talking about abuse, let's take it down to the nitty gritty. How familiar are you with Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying? We talked about
Psychology.
we talked about the need of partnership
Mm-hmm.
as parents. Do you understand that your child needs you? And I'm not talking about to survive. I'm talking about they need your love. They need your reassurance. They need you to pour confidence into them. They need you to
Yes.
breathe life into them. That's your job. Kids don't learn self esteem from Jordans. Children do not learn
Yes.
moral value. They don't learn empathy from YouTube. Those are taught behaviors. And those are the ingredients of making balanced human beings. Because your child might be depressed because of you.
Yes,
Your
Lord.
your
With
Gucci
all the negativity.
sandals do not compensate for time. They do not compensate. If your child is not affectionate and won't embrace affection, some people don't like to be touched. My daughter, she doesn't like to be touched. I don't engage her without permission. I ask her would she like a hug? Because let's talk about abuse again and sexual abuse. Do you understand that when children are abused, they were groomed by someone? And your
Mm-hmm.
child can easily be groomed by one
By
little
any,
kid.
yes,
Stop
yes.
Oh, my bad.
making
I'm
your
sorry.
children give affection to people when they don't want to. Do not make
Mm-hmm.
your child hug anybody. Do not make them give them a kiss. You are opening them up to a situation where they can be groomed by a human being because you forced them into an uncomfortable situation. Because if you
Matter of fact,
didn't
hold
force
on.
them,
Can we stop sitting our little girls on grown men's laps, please?
Oh,
because if you
absolutely.
didn't force them, if you don't force them into
Please,
affection like that, when
please.
they're able to tell you no, I don't want to do that, then when somebody does something inappropriate, your
They
baby is
will
going to tell you. Mommy, that made
immediately.
me uncomfortable. Daddy, I didn't like the way they touched me. Because you got to understand that boundaries are taught early.
Yes, they
Yeah.
are.
I'm
But
not
you
in
know
here
what?
knocking my kids across the head because when they were younger,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm. Say
set
that.
them firmly. I was a hard ass when they were little. I could
Yo,
like
say that. Say that. Say that.
because
I'm
I
not
was a
gonna leave
hard
your
ass
hands
when they
with it
were
like
little. It's a job, people.
it is 100.
But this is the job that if you fuck it up, you fuck
It fucked up.
somebody up.
Long term. Long term.
Lifelong. And it takes how many times did it say it takes 36 times, I believe, to do something to build a habit?
Mm-hmm.
21
How long
days.
do you think it takes to undo trauma?
21 days.
21. There you go. 21 days to build a habit.
So how long does
So
it take
think
to break
about the
one?
impact of what you did to undo the trauma. Because I'm telling you, I was sexually abused as well. 18 months. 18 months on a couch before I could even recall the incident that I suppressed. It took an additional year for me to work through the account. It takes a long time, a lot of work, a lot of tears to deal with trauma. And it takes something from you, whether it is sexual, mental, emotional, or physical. When you are abused, it takes a chunk of you. We have got to do better in safeguarding our children. Stop thinking that sexual abuse is the only thing that ruins your children. It is not. Because
Right.
emotional abuse comes in all forms, it comes in layers, and it is harder to undo than being beat, than being raped, because emotional abuse rips your spirit apart. And when your spirit is broken, you are a
Yes, Lord.
shell of a person.
Right. But you know what? You mentioned something about the kids that are telling their parents, hey, somebody touched me inappropriately. What about the parents who don't want to hear that? You know how many children
Yes.
report to their parents that someone touched me inappropriately, they grabbed this, they did that, I didn't like the way this felt, they made me put my pants down, and parents are not wanting to hear it, especially when it's a
Mm-hmm.
situation where there's a single parent and oftentimes a single mother who moves the new man in. That man has a
Mm-hmm.
sexual relationship with the child. The child tells the mother, do you know how many mothers that are out there that are blaming those kids for those
Mm-hmm.
relationships? They are actually, there's actually video out on social media that was going around where a mother found out that her, I think the daughter was 14 years old, was there was some sexual relations going on between her and the daughter and the husband or living boyfriend, whatever he was. The mother, when she found out about it, she actually attacked her child with a cell phone, beat this child in the head because she was upset that her daughter, her 14-year-old daughter, was having a sexual relationship with the man of the house.
Let me play devil's advocate real quick.
Please do.
Let's say the 14-year-old did engage the man.
That happens too. I know those situations too.
Let's
But they're
let's talk
doing
about
it They're
But
doing it to get back at their parents.
let's
They're
unpack it,
doing it.
right? Because they touched on one place. They did it to get back on their parents. But here's the thing: do you understand when children act out inappropriately sexually, they probably were abused in the first place?
Facts. That's
Because
exactly what I was
I'm
going
not
to
going
say.
to do I'm not going to do too much of my personal experience here because I don't have the bandwidth for it. But I'm gonna say this: I was 7 years old the first time I had a penis in my mouth. Rest there. I was 16 when I was raped, and I'm going to say this: what was said to me was, "You could not have been raped. You do not act like a victim."
Mm-hmm.
We gonna rest there. I
That
gotta
happens
go
all
back
too
to what,
often.
what World Class said: neglect by way of ignorance is abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Absolutely,
It's
Yep.
because ignorance
You
is what
choosing
they
to be that way.
talking
You
about.
refusing to educate yourself. Amen.
And
so
ignorance comes from ignoring as well.
Mm-hmm.
You're ignorant to the situation because you didn't acknowledge it in the first place. He
that
Exactly.
is
part.
absolutely right because ignorance is more detrimental than ignorance is not bliss.
No, no,
What about
not at
Ignorance,
all.
ignorance uh, damages lives, damages people, damages situations, cause
Mm-hmm.
very, very ugly things to happen.
so what
Ignorance.
about situations where um you the abuse is in the home, because I'm like you, Letitia. I was younger than that.
Absolutely
I was
world
like
class.
3. Okay, like
Yeah, right.
3. Women and men, right? So as an adult, I struggled a lot with trying to figure out whether or not I would have um, been bisexual or liked women, but for the fact that that was the first person that ever touched me. Um, well, it wasn't a man. The first time it ever happened, it was a lady. So I struggled with sexuality as an adult and a lot of other traumatic things because of sexual abuse. And because it was happening in my home,
Mm-hmm.
it was hard for me to go to my parents and be like, you know, I'm being abused. Um, and then when I finally built up the courage to be able to say things like that, um, I don't think that I don't want to say that it was ignored. I want to say that it was it was like, no, this can't be happening. Like this, it can't be real. Like my kids wouldn't do that, or you know what I mean. It makes you start to feel like nobody believes you, so nobody cares. So maybe it's nothing wrong with it. Maybe it's normal. Maybe it's what's supposed to happen because nobody's saying anything about it. Nobody's stopping it. So um, then you start to normalize that kind of stuff. And sometimes when you're taught um, that abuse is okay, then that travels with you, and you could go from being the abused to becoming the abuser because you don't know what you don't
Mhm.
know.
Facts.
When
Mm-hmm.
if you think it's okay, I mean, and not
Mm-hmm.
just sex, I mean, we could talk about it with anything. If it's something that you believe and that you feel is okay, then what's to stop you from teaching it to somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Right.
it becomes a cycle.
Generational curses.
It
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
becomes a
because
cycle.
Roxy touched on that abuse aspect and how it creates abuses, and then we can circle it all the way back around to where we were talking about mental health earlier and children
Mm-hmm.
misbehaving because
Mm-hmm.
people do not pay attention to when their children all of a sudden have changes in their behavior, whether it's their personality,
Hmm.
whether it's you understand what I'm saying? If your child is sad, if your child is all of a sudden acting out,
Mm-hmm.
But if all you do is put them in front of an iPhone, how do you know that? How do you know their behavior changes? Most of these parents, and what a lot of people don't realize is that you could be at home living with your kids 24 hours a day. You could still be
And I'm
absentee. Still be absentee, living up under the same roof with them 24 hours a day. And most parents don't even realize that. There are so many kids growing up with their parents or even a single parent in the home that has zero relationship with that or those parents. There's no attachment. They're never home. When they are at home, everyone's doing their own thing. Everyone in
Mm-hmm.
the house is on their
absolutely.
own phone.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not spending quality time with our kids. We're not teaching our kids anything. We're not putting any values in our kids. We're basically just letting them grow up in age and sitting, pushing them out there to the world.
Yeah. Or even if they're not in front of the iPad or computer, people overschedule their children all the time, which I find to be abusive. When your child has a heavy
Yep.
Yeah, you're trying to make them busy. You're making your child busy with
you
a
are
busy.
overworked
Yes.
with children, they're in too
Mm-hmm.
many activities.
Mm-hmm.
They're not getting home till 8 o'clock. So they have homework to do.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying?
That
Not
reminds me,
structuring your home properly is a form of abuse. If your kid is running amok, if you have a 4 and 5 year old and your kid is running through the house at midnight on a regular, your child is not getting adequate rest, that is abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Because
but
we
you know what,
really got to start
Letitia?
normalizing these conversations. If you everybody does not structure their home to a T, right? And for most of us, you shouldn't, unless your child has special needs and requires that. There should be downtime. But if you're not giving structure, if you're not get how do they transition into, because your adult life is structured. If you're doing it, you got to be at work a certain time, you got to get tasks done within a certain time. You're not teaching these things and you fail.
Right. But
Mm.
what about the ones? So you touched on something about the schedules. What about the parents who had dreams for themselves, didn't succeed at those dreams or didn't achieve them? So they're pushing their dreams off their kids. Because what you said reminded me of the pageant moms. Do you know how many pageant
Mm-hmm.
moms out there are overweight? And they're
Dance
pushing their
mom.
beauty, or they're not necessarily attractive. And I hate to say that, but they exist.
She said not
So they
necessarily
have
attractive.
beautiful children. So they push their children off into this
Mm-hmm.
pageantry world at the age of 3, 4, 5, and 6 years old with all these hectic, crazy schedules. The kids don't have friends. So they grow up not being able to be kids because they have adult lifestyles and adult schedules. But you're forcing your lifetime dreams onto your children
Mhm.
instead of allowing them to develop into themselves and finding out what they're passionate about or what they're talented at.
And then
But there are a
emotionally
lot of parents who
blackmailing them
force
when they
their
don't
dreams
want it.
on their kids.
And then emotionally blackmailing them when they don't want it.
True.
Because just like mothers in these pageantries, fathers with these sports. I was on a show last week and I made a comment to a guy and I said, why do y'all push sports harder than y'all push academics?
Yes.
Your kid is the top running back. Can your kid play chess?
Can your kid read? Can your kid
And
write?
and I'm not even going to get into where I
Math?
went with
Hold
that
on, hold
comment.
on, hold on. Let's
Listen
talk
in
about that.
academics. It's a
Let's talk about that.
necessity for real.
So you know how like lately everyone's, especially with this whole culture with, us getting off into this black knowledge, supporting black with everything that happened from 2020, the current environment of today. Um, oh shoot, I just lost my train of thought. Dang it. Go back to what you were
Maybe if
saying.
I keep ranting, you'll catch it again.
It'll come back to me. I lost my train of thought.
So what my issue is, I'm going to dig into it. Fuck it. We got
I
time.
got it. I got it.
There she
So
go.
So yeah, so a lot of people were sharing like different documentaries that were really interesting and stuff like that. So one thing that bothered me was one thing I didn't notice that the Black community talked about was the Colin Kaepernick documentary that was on Netflix. Now I'm gonna tell you why it bothered me that the Black community didn't touch on this, didn't talk about it. It wasn't like a hot topic, is because he basically broke down the stereotypes and the racism with people of color in the sports industry, right? And of course, he grew up with a white mother. And what was interesting about that, so on top of that, Doc, so you have this situation where parents, and especially in the Black community, we have this issue where we think our kids, especially our boys, it's like we only have three dreams for them: sports, rap,
Yep.
acting. Maybe, and if that doesn't work, neighborhood drug dealer. But it's always that fast money that we're forcing our kids to chase fast money. So that doc to me was interesting that the Black community wasn't talking about it, because it basically makes you face the idea that if this system is set up for us to be accepted and watched and loved from a fan standpoint, but not respected from a race standpoint, then as a Black community, why are we pushing our children into these industries where we're not respected? But that also brought me back to another documentary that was on Netflix, and it was about medication. I don't remember what it was called, but they were talking about the opioid epidemic and kids being on Ritalin. And they
Mm-hmm.
talked about the kids that are in sports, the high school
Mm-hmm.
kids, the college kids, and about
Mm-hmm.
how they suffer all these injuries. They're on all these different kinds of medication, just like with the Olympics going on now. You had
Mm-hmm.
all these people that are hopped up on all these performance enhancing drugs,
Mm-hmm.
or just anything to cope. Opioids, everything to cope, because they're living these adult hectic lives. And one thing that we don't do is, while we're forcing our children to chase that fast money, while we want them to be the football players, the basketball players, the rappers, and all that, we're not talking about the damage that is caused by chasing lifestyles in those industries. We're not talking about the drugs that those kids end up on. We're not talking about the racism that they experience. We're not talking about the competition, everything that they have to endure in order to try to make it, because everybody can't be the quarterback. So if every Black childhood dream is the NFL and everybody can't be the quarterback, you're setting your children up for failure.
I have actively discouraged that kind of behavior in my
That's a
sons,
childhood
and I'm
trauma.
going to explain to you why. And I try to steer away from race topics because I come across extremely racist. I'm not shucking and jiving for no fucking white people. And I mean that from the depths of my soul. Every time that you put a basketball in your son's hand and push him into the NBA, and you put a football in your son's hand and push him into the NFL, it equates to shucking and jiving, in my opinion. And I'm going to tell you why. Because as Black males, Black men are the most undervalued humans on this planet. I will not give you my sons. So I will not give you my sons for your entertainment. I will not give you
Okay.
my sons. I will not give you my sons for your jail. What you can have is my son's natural Black ass as you see him running past you, excelling. Because what I push is academics. Because I get
Yes.
into this conversation about women and these slick ass mouths, right? And I had that conversation with a young lady the other day, and I said, as Black women, what we have to learn, darling, is one of the most powerful things we have is silence. It's silence. And somebody gonna look at me crazy.
It's
But you
intimidating.
talk too much. You talk too much, and you give people a roadmap to your movements. Be
Mm-hmm.
quiet. Just be silent. We don't have to know how you moving, darling.
Mm-mm.
It's okay. It's too much. We do too much performing on a regular. And here we go. It goes back to the slave mentality for me. Because we were constantly doing things for masses fucking amusement. So although I enjoy and love the game of football, I no longer support it. I do not watch NFL anymore. That first year killed me, y'all, because I be going through withdrawal. But what has happened is you're telling me that my black sons cannot be in your boardroom, but they can make you millions of dollars at the expense of their bodies and their minds.
And their minds, right?
And their minds. My sons are worth more than that. Your sons are worth more than that. And I'm not saying that just because they choose to play sports means exactly. Just because they choose to play sports, because I push sports on all of my children for team building. Understand, because the lesson was you understanding that your actions impacts more than you. That's where the team thing came from.
Right.
But it was never my intention to raise children that wanted to go to the NFL and NBA because I have a disdain for the culture.
Right.
And we got to stop buying into things that do not serve our children. It is abuse. Telling your son that he cannot be anything more than an athlete or a rapper does a huge disservice to your child in the black community.
Amen.
So I gotta step on in here real quick because my son is an excellent football player, right? And he did want to go to the NFL. He played college football. He doesn't play sports anymore. He didn't go to the NFL. He ended up getting his girlfriend pregnant and coming back home and doing the whole family thing. And now he done started his own clothing line.
That's the baby you be spoiling.
But that's what I pushed on him. And
Rexy done broke up.
Right now,
hold on, she really broke up.
If them grants though, he wasn't playing nobody's sports, and I don't care about none of that. Sports definitely builds character. It's team building. It helps him to be able to have a whole other family outside of our own. It helps him to be able to play and build with other young people that had the same mindset and dreams, that was focused and had goals like he did. But it wasn't the only thing that I pushed on him. And I feel like us as parents, because there are parents that do that. Like, you ain't gonna be nothing else. You can't do nothing else. I feel like we have lost sight of the trades. Like, there's carpenters out here making $40 and $50 an hour. I mean, there's viable businesses that we
hold on. When the plumber come to your house, $75 an hour. Minimum visit, 2 hours. Yes. So for knocking on your door, a plumber's getting $150 just for knocking on your door.
You got an electrician making the same amount. And
knocking on your door.
Yeah, you got people doing HVAC doing the same thing. I mean, these are tradable, these are marketable, these keep you in the market.
But they not being taught though. They even closed down the majority of the trade schools.
Because we're not investing in them. There's nothing wrong with being a blue collar worker.
Nothing.
You know, I was married 14 years. My ex-husband was blue collar. I was white collar. I don't like getting my hands dirty, and I ain't doing no labor. So there you go. But the point is, you have to give your children options, and we keep painting them into these boxes, doing a huge disservice. There are so many young men that I come in contact with that are not in engineering because y'all not pushing science. Y'all not pushing science nearly as hard, and black children tend to have an aptitude for it, and we're not pushing them there.
Yes.
They look and they see Asians in this. Your babies have an aptitude for it. My oldest son is a C average student on average. He gets to high school in every single computer class he had. That child did not get anything lower than a 97%. He excels at math. He can't do geometry, but he can do statistics and probability. He was able to get through.
I know that's right.
You understand what I'm saying? Stop painting them into these boxes. If you don't open your eyes, you can't open their eyes.
True.
Say that.
You have to see who they are.
You can't leave where you won't go. Can't teach what y'all don't know. Come on now.
Two things. one, so you talked about, that the team building that come with sports. So there's another benefit to sports, especially in this day and age where there's a lot of single motherism. Oftentimes coaches are male. So oftentimes that father figure, that male role model will come in the form of a coach. So I,
Mhm.
Yes.
I agree. I agree. There
Yeah.
are benefits to sports, but not to say that's the only dream we should have in the Black community. We should be dreaming beyond a ball, period.
Absolutely.
Dream
Yeah.
beyond the
And
ball. But there
not
was
only
another
is it
thing,
narrow, the shelf life is horrible.
right? But so back to, so world class put up a comment about our children definitely have an aptitude for science, and he's right. So one thing I challenge parents to do, if you're listening, instead of buying your children toys and phones and Jordans and all that, look into companies that you can get STEM geared toys or whatever. So there's this one called KiwiCo,
Yep. I was just about to say
KIWICO,
that. Yep.
right? And so from every age, from toddler on up, you can enroll in the program where every month they will send you a different shipment, and they're all STEM geared projects, whether it be science, whether it be math, and it helps them develop into who they are. They're going to build things. They're going to get off into some real trade, some real talent, because regardless of how good you are at football, and don't
Absolutely.
get me wrong, there are some great
Yeah.
quarterbacks out there, some great running backs out there, there's some
Yeah.
great
Hmm.
forwards out there. There are some greats out there. They exist. Everybody can't be Michael Jordan. That's just a fact. And even if your child has the potential to be a Michael Jordan, stop telling them that's all they can be, and
Yeah.
actually tap into different aspects. One thing I love my mother for, when we were growing up, we were allowed to engage in every activity under the sun. When I was a child, when I tell y'all, I did ballet, I clogged, I ran track, I did basketball, I played baseball, I was in spelling bees. My mother let us engage, and she not only did she allow it, she encouraged it. You're going to do more than just play sports. My mother also didn't believe in overly complimenting children, because you're not going to grow up thinking that all you have to do is walk in the door and present your looks. You're going to
Absolutely.
bring something to the table other than a pretty face. Were you saying something, Roxy?
I don't know. I was just nodding in agreement. Like, yes, I was the same way. It was encouraged. I could do whatever I chose to do. Spelling bees, I wrestled.
Right,
Mm-mm.
But
right. Matter of
all
fact, even when we were out of school, so during the summer, my mother used to actually make us, you either had to read books, or we like to read the encyclopedia. Me and my sister, we read encyclopedias all summer long, or you had to write an essay. Choice is
Yes.
yours. But just because it's summer break,
You
don't
got to
mean
do
there's an
some education.
intellectual break.
Yep.
You're gonna learn
Mhm.
365 in this house.
Yes.
There are
Yes.
no intellectual breaks. And
Yes.
we don't
Yes.
spend enough time mentally developing our children. We don't spend enough time engaging in developing an intellectual being. We don't
Yes.
engage in STEM projects. You
Mhm.
got cashiers right now. I was at Walmart one day, and I swear, I forgot what the bill came to. And at first I was gonna, but it was under $20. And at first I was just gonna get rid of the 20, but I realized I had some change in my pocket that I wanted to get rid of. So it just so happened that she had already typed in the $20 bill, right? So I was like, well, here I have some change. So instead of you giving me like the four ones back, you can give me a solid five. She actually sat there stuck on stupid, like she didn't know how much money she owed me. I said,
Yes,
okay,
she
so
did.
if you owed me
So many people.
436 and I gave you the equivalent in change back, instead of you giving me the 436, now you just owe me a $5 bill. But our kids don't understand. You literally got
Yes. Say
adults
it.
who don't know basic
It's
math.
not just the
Yep.
kids. Let's stop
Yeah,
saying
no,
that.
it's
No, I
adults.
mean these are
It's
young
adults.
adults. These are
It's adults
adults.
in these cashiers. These are
Period.
full grown adults who don't
Yeah.
Yeah,
know
because
simple
I know some of us
math.
that can't do no math now.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
But
And
we're
It
so
is. That's it.
busy
My thing is,
chasing
we just need to work
sports.
more on it. We just need to work more on it. I'm telling you, get them
Listen.
babies them workbooks. I
work
mean,
on
they've been doing them
yourself,
workbooks.
though. Work on yourself, because we keep talking about the babies, but think about this as parents. Because myself, Roxy, and Anissa are parents, and you know damn well we was helping them kids with homework and had to go back somewhere for
Yeah.
reference
Yeah.
because we couldn't remember how to
Hold
do
on.
it.
Don't leave me out. Don't leave me out. I got 5 beautiful
That's the
godkids. Don't
expert
leave me
I'm
out.
about to
Okay.
say, she got all them.
Look,
Yeah.
I didn't know you get hemmed up in, but hemmed up in homework. We got to refresh.
Right.
You
So
understand
that.
what I'm saying? Because learning, one of y'all just said, learning is lifelong.
Yeah.
Learning is lifelong. Just like being a good human, because that's a lifelong journey. You should be constantly improving yourself.
Yeah.
You should constantly be leading by example. You should constantly be learning, because you're going to constantly be teachers. Your job is not over as parents when they turn 18. That is abusive behavior as well. Stop saying that you don't need a village. Everyone needs somebody.
Yes.
I'm so tired of people saying, I made it out the mud by myself. You
No, you
weren't
didn't.
supposed to. You were
Yeah.
neglected by
Right.
the people who were charged in your well-being. As adults, we require the village. We are social creatures. It continues through life. Stop that.
Right.
Wait.
But
And
about
it's
the village
another thing too that
mentality.
we do. We
Hold
will
on, real quick. About the village mentality. It's not just about it takes the whole village. You can only teach somebody what you know. So if in your limited thought
Yeah,
process, if this is the only thing that you know, so that's all that you can instill in the child, the village is who teaches the child the things that you don't know. So you're right. It's a
absolutely.
village mentality, not just when it comes to discipline, but when it comes to raising a well-rounded individual. It takes multiple personalities, multiple different aspects. Not only that, children grow children don't always you can grow up in the house with a parent, right? But that doesn't mean you want to talk to your mom or dad about everything. Some children respond better talking to another adult, maybe a teacher, maybe a coach,
Yeah.
or whatever the situation be. That goes back to the village mentality. So it's not just about giving them options as an adult, it's about giving them options as a child, because they're not always going to come to you.
They're not. And they shouldn't.
That
Right.
part.
And they shouldn't, because you are not the master of all trades.
But there's parents out here that assume that their kids is just supposed to know too. There are things that, it's a lot of things that we have to teach our kids. Kids when they born, they don't know anything for real. And it's a lot of people that assume that, oh, you supposed to know. Oh, you should have known better than that.
Yes. They
You
act like
should-
a 2-year-old is programmed already.
I had a whole little girl in my class. So I have a STEAM Academy summer camp. And we had about 40 kids, age range 5 to 15 years old in my summer camp. And this little girl decided, she started her cycle in summer camp. And she decided that instead of telling somebody or getting some help, because I got a food pantry in the building, in the same building. I got pads and tampons and all kind of stuff in the same building. But instead of her telling somebody, she took the panties and she stuffed them inside of something. And then she went and hid it and bled all over her pants because nobody taught her that was a normal thing. She didn't know no better. She thinking that it's supposed to be normal. And when her mom came in and we said something to her about it, because I got her whole little kit together. I'm a mom. I got 4 girls, and we learned that stuff early. I started my cycle early, so I taught them about that kind of stuff early. We talk about that. She had no idea. So I'm like, don't be ashamed of it. It's a normal thing. You're a young lady and this is kind of stuff that your body gonna go through. You need to start preparing yourself. You need to be carrying these pads and stuff in your little purse. Her mom gets there and we telling her about it and she gets mad at the little girl. Like, but you didn't teach this child that this was a normal thing. She mad at her, smacking her and yelling, talking about why she had the panties and all of this stuff, but she don't know no better. You can't assume that she was supposed to know that.
Embarrassed. That was
very
embarrassed, and she took it out on that child
because the child didn't know what to do. She just didn't. She just couldn't admit. Okay, well, I never taught her that.
Yeah, exactly.
Whole thing.
Because blood coming from that area and you don't know what's supposed to will freak you out.
What?
Now, my mother used to talk with me early. Thank God, because I was 9. So thank God.
Yes.
These children are developing quickly.
Yes.
I'm gonna check it out, world class. I'm gonna have to go check it out.
For sure.
These children are developing early. I think that we take too much for granted because children didn't grow up the way we did. There was censorship in the way we grew up because the
Say
world
that.
is big, and people got to understand that the world is much larger because of social media, because they have access to the internet. You know, the world is bigger from your living room, from your bedroom, the reach. You know, people are like, oh my God, the world is so crazy. I don't really think the world is any crazier than it used to be. It's just that information travels so much faster because we have the internet. People were always predators. There were always serial killers. You just
Always.
know more because the information is in front of you. It's readily available.
Right.
So
It's
children
more
don't have censorship anymore,
Mhm.
and everybody accuses them of being too grown. And I don't think that's the case. I don't think they're too grown. They're just given so much information that they know so much more than what they should. There's no censorship anymore. And we have to be cognizant of that. They're never going to be as innocent as we were because they have it at their fingertips. Just had a conversation about how all of my children don't have phones. And people look at me like I'm crazy because my children do not have phones. I have to limit what you're giving my babies because I have to give it to them, not you.
Mm-hmm.
And we
and you
live in
know
an
what?
over.
And that's why I don't understand why they're banning books. I'm like, all these kids got cell phones. What's on the internet is worse than anything you'll read in a book. I don't understand the cancel culture with the
The
books. I really don't.
the cancel culture is going to lead to slavery. That's what the fuck is going to happen. Because this is what happens when you erase history. You're laughing, Russ. I'm dead serious. When you erase history, you remove the lesson. There's a whole lot of ugly, and you cannot remove it because it's ugly. Because you create a state of ignorance. Create a state of ignorance. But you know, what do we know?
You know another thing I don't like, and this is more
It
so in the
is
younger
modern
kids
book burning. It
Yeah.
than
is.
than older kids. I hate that parents don't know how to talk to their kids, and I don't mean like talking to them in a derogatory manner. I mean talking to your children like young adults. So it starts with the baby talk. When I tell you I despise the goo goo gaga talk, don't get me wrong. I understand a 5-month old cannot form a sentence. I get that part. But where do you think they learn? They learn by listening to you. So if you, for the first 8 months of a child's life, you're goo goo gaga, blah, 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 doing all that, where do you think they're going to learn talking from? So, and then that bleeds off into other avenues or other ages of life. So, whether it's talking about the birds and the bees, I don't care how young a child is, you can have a birds and bees conversation. There are levels to the birds and bees
Yeah.
conversation. But once a child, like for instance, when I was married, my husband's son lived with us and he was with us in his teens. So when he lost his virginity, he happened to be living with us at the time. Now we had talked to him about sex long before that, right? But when we found once that broken virginity situation happened, now we can talk to you about sex. Now we're going to have an adult conversation because you're beyond the typical birds and the bees. But we don't even talk to our kids real. Like, for instance, I was talking with my girlfriends when we had the conversation with him, and we were trying to teach him the do's and don'ts. We understand that you 16, you're feeling yourself, you're gonna be trying to, get involved with all the little girls you can, blah blah blah. So we were basically telling him the things not to do. Like if you get caught in another man's house jumping out his window because her daddy came home, I can't be responsible for how that man responded because you in another person's house. We also taught him, and this is what I told my girlfriend, don't ever leave your condom at another woman's house. And I taught him this was years ago, years ago. And when I was telling to one of my girlfriends, she actually asked me, "You actually taught him that?" I said, "Absolutely." I said,
Yes.
"Because I know women. I know personally, not stories, personally know women who will go in there and pull a condom out of the trash can and do the whole turkey baster. I said, and a lot of men, I also know a lot of men as adults that are caught up on child support cases because of a turkey baster situation. So
Not
yes,
a turkey baster.
I taught my
For real.
husband's son, I
I'm
taught him,
sorry, I had to
don't
jump on
leave your,
there for not a turkey
hey,
baster.
hey, I taught him not to. And when she asked me that, the only way I knew how to
Real.
respond was, you know what's funny? This isn't even my biological child, and I'm teaching him that. You got a whole biological kid, and you ain't teaching him about hoes because they exist.
Right, because
And
it's levels.
shut up,
But because it
Auntie
goes back to
Roxy.
what we were saying earlier. When I say I don't think males are more sexually aggressive than females,
They're not.
it goes back
It's
to
some young
here's
girls.
the thing, and then because people play dumb, right? Who was in the garden of Eden? Who ate the fucking fruit? Who finessed Adam into eating the fruit? Stop playing with me. Women have been pulling the strings for a long time.
I always say
Stop.
women ain't the victims they
Stop
play. They
acting
just play
like
victim on
your
TV.
daughters are not finessing these young men into situations. Stop. Stop lying to your sons and not telling them she's finessing you.
What? Say that.
Because
saying
she
with your
has
mind, baby.
But hold
young
on.
kids.
They can't do that because they too busy high-fiving that feminine, so-called feminine energy.
You can't high five that feminine energy and they
But
playing your
that's what they
baby. Come
doing.
on, y'all. They
That's what they
playing
We
your
doing.
started out,
baby.
but here's the thing: we started out talking about emotional abuse, correct?
That's childhood trauma.
What people underestimate how early children learn how to emotionally manipulate.
Oh no, y'all crazy in the head if you don't
Emotional
think them
manipulate
babies
is
don't
something that is
emotionally
learned
manipulate
in
you.
Yeah.
the crib. They learn it in
Crib.
the crib.
In
They
the
understand.
womb. In the womb.
They understand that the cry will get the
Will get
attention.
you what? I get you to come over here, watch me.
They
Bam. You over
understand
here.
that if they cry a little more when they want to be picked up,
I'm gonna get you to grab me.
you'll
I'm
come
gonna get
running.
held. Yo.
Then you
Say
get
that.
toddlers, and this is where the "you don't love me anymore" comes from. That's emotional manipulation that a lot of you play into because y'all don't think your babies are capable. Children are very smart.
Very.
Very.
You just have not figured out that
How smart they are.
children have a better aptitude of emotional navigation than knowledge of the world. They learn how to manipulate. Because what did I say earlier? Empathy, that's something that's taught. Manipulation is something that's learned because manipulation is easy. It's a cause and effect.
Yes.
That's all manipulation is. It's a cause and effect. He said, Tyler's a terrorist. They damn sight are.
How can you sit up here as a parent and not understand how smart children are when a 4-year-old knows which parent to ask, can they have a cookie? Because if I ask daddy, he gonna say no, mama let me have it. Or if I ask mama, daddy let me go to the party, mommy won't. Don't children as young as 3, 4 know which parent to ask for what? So how can you sit up here and act like a child isn't smart? All they are little sponges. But what kind of fluid are you filling them up with?
And I need y'all parents to understand when they in that school, I need y'all to understand. Listen, your kids be messing up. Just come in being open-minded to the fact that your kids be messing up, okay? Don't come in always wanting to bash.
Right? Hey, because some of y'all children is absorbing dirty mop water. And you need to bleach your water.
I do this all the time. I go in when I walk into a classroom, I'm listening because I know my children. And I open by saying, because I understand what kind of assholes my children are. There are some of them that are outright, because I tell the truth about who they are. And because there's trust, I know who they are. I told y'all, Alex is either Alexander the Great or Alexander the Terrible. I hate to pick on my baby because he's so awesome. But when he's being a motherfucker, he's being he done set the shit on fire. It is burning when Alex is a motherfucker. Now, my pretty girl, she's a quiet storm. That's my sociopath. she will flash a smile and cut your ass straight down. But I know my children. You understand what I'm saying? I know who they are as people. I embrace it. I told them,
Toddlers are
don't fuck with them,
terrorists.
you don't have to deal with the repercussions of it. Like, you understand what I'm saying? So when we get into these school environments, because it's a double-edged sword. Going back to what I said about how my mother don't talk to me crazy, so you couldn't talk to me crazy, because grown people have a tendency of delivering things sideways because it's a child and they think they can. If you've ever come across a hardest child, you understand. They understand the assignment, because mommy's a motherfucker and they know it. So my babies get silent. Call my mother. They just gonna sit back and enjoy the show, and it's gonna be a show. Because I'm going to pick your ass apart. Nasty, nice, quietly. Double-edged sword. We have to do better in being our children's advocates.
Mm-hmm.
And understand that advocating for your child is not always going to the school because somebody did something wrong to your child. Advocating for your child is also being there when your child is in the wrong.
Yes.
Sometimes you have to mediate the situation, because there are times that I come across a situation with a child and an adult. I need to mediate the situation because both of y'all assholes was wrong. And I'm not tearing my child down, because here's the thing about my discipline. Just the same as you wouldn't chastise your husband in front of somebody else, I'm against chastising my children in front of somebody else. That's not for you. That's between me and my child. Yep. Now, if my child owes you an apology, I also don't force apologies.
Girl, I was just going to say that. I do not believe in forcing apologies.
Because my baby told me, I said, I got a call because my daughter wouldn't apologize. She got into a fight. She wouldn't apologize. Well, what do you want me to do? Well, they need to apologize and move on. And my baby said, but I'm not sorry. I asked her to stop. So I hit her. And I'm fine. I just don't want to talk about it anymore.
Even if you forced her to apologize, she still doesn't mean the apology.
And that's why I don't force apologies.
I don't understand that. I never got that. I'm like, if they want to apologize, they'll apologize for their wrongdoing. But if they're not sorry, making them say I'm sorry doesn't change the fact that they're not sorry.
They're not sorry.
Oh, you're teaching them to be disingenuous. Is what you're teaching.
Right. Lying.
Just right. I was about to say, just be a liar. Just be a people pleaser for that.
I use the word disingenuous because it was multi-like layer. You're right. It's lying. It's being disingenuous because you get into an argument with somebody, your mate. They say I'm sorry. Damn, I'm sorry. Drop it. It's very disingenuous.
Right.
Because again, we're teaching behavior. So there's so many layers to this abusive aspect. And I think we've touched on things that people do not categorize as abuse because it wasn't physical or it wasn't sexual. Yep. Because those are the only types of abuse that some people acknowledge. But there's so many layers to abuse. There's so many ways to traumatize children, and they carry, because the shit you say, when I say watch your mouth when you're talking to me, because words have power. Our grandmother said it all the time. I don't understand why people say, "Oh, these kids are so sensitive. They say X, Y, Z," because words fucking hurt.
They do. Words hurt.
Because words hurt. Words hurt more than the black eye that I got that already healed. Because if your mother says that you're a fucking idiot, and I didn't want you, you gonna carry that your whole life.
Your whole life.
Words don't hurt. Words are extremely painful. And there you go, suppressing emotions again.
But we're back to that same woman when she becomes an adult and has a man. She don't understand why her man can't have an emotional conversation with her.
See?
One, because he's taught not to be emotional.
That's what I was just about to say. A vicious cycle.
He's uncomfortable in it. Because when you force people into feeling things, emotional things, and they're not accustomed to it, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. And you backing somebody into a corner and they're not accustomed to being emotional creatures, and you backing them into that corner, what's going to happen? They're going to fight their way out the corner, which triggers an abusive response sometimes. It all goes in a circle. It all goes in a circle. And we're teaching these very, very detrimental behaviors that turn into abuse, that turn into trauma for somebody. Because hurt people.
Period.
So when you grow up and you've been traumatized, you're more likely to traumatize someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And because you live with the trauma, you're desensitized to it.
Yep.
Right.
And a lot of people don't even realize that that's what they're doing. It's a lot of situations where you don't even realize that that's what you're doing. That
Right.
you're hurting somebody else. She busts
Say
right
that
in.
again. But there's times when you do know what you're doing to people, and you don't care. There's a lot of adults. I mean, I remember, if I'm not mistaken, there's different types of articles everywhere in regards to just adults just being reckless and careless when it comes to children and their upbringing, and it has a negative effect, or it will most likely have a negative effect on their life in the future. Sister D.
Because people lack recognition. Think about how many people you've been in a relationship with, or how many friends you have that say, my mother and my father raised me the same way. And at one point they complained about how their parents reared them. And then the next breath they say, well, this is how I was raised. And then they do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've normalized this horrific behavior. We, especially in the Black community, normalize what is classified as bullying. You picking with you picking with that one kid, you picking with that cousin at the cookout. That's bullying behavior.
Yep. But you just call it picking. I'm just picking and playing.
Right. And you're bullying. And it's not, here's the thing, it's not about people being too sensitive. It's really about you understanding what triggers people. It's really understanding triggers. It's really understanding what makes other people uncomfortable, and you not being okay with your comedy causing discomfort and pain to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I did it all in good fun. Did the person on the receiving end think it was fun? Did they laugh because they were embarrassed and uncomfortable and too uncomfortable to say so in that setting? Or was it really funny to them? Because there's too many people walking around. I don't care how you feel about, well, that's why the world is in the shape it is, because you didn't care how your thoughts or whatever you said or did affects the next person. That's really what happened.
Yep.
We're raising psychos. Where's the lie?
Psychos.
Honestly, we're raising psychos.
Or criminals and degenerates.
You don't care.
Right. Say it again. Criminals are who?
Degenerates. Social misfits.
Yes.
Yep.
All the words and above.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we need to change that, fix that, change that.
Right. Oh, but I finally found it too. So anybody when we were talking to the segment about the kids being on medication, watch the Take Your Pills documentary. It is amazing. They talk about the stats and how many children are actually on different types of drugs, all the opioids and all that type of stuff. Very, very good documentary. But yeah, watch Take Your Pills. They talk about the college kids in sports and all the drugs that they're on, the pain medications, everything. But yeah, very good doc.
Yeah. Oh, yes, world class. That child abuse is the standard for Black people, because somebody has to pay for how the white man make them feel. Why not the ones that can't say no? Children. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
These
I agree.
grandbabies who are not afforded the luxury of being children, who are not afforded the luxury of not being responsible. How many children do you know that are paying bills in a single mama's house? Because what did we talk about? Single motherism. Because you couldn't settle your job and you're now making your child
A son
be
husband,
the man of the house.
a son husband.
That is abuse. That is abuse.
A son husband.
Yes, your inappropriate relationships with your sons. That is abuse. That's nasty, actually, because it's borderline incestuous. But we'll talk about that another
And
time.
that's how the Norman Bates of the world were created.
You damn right.
For sure.
You damn right. We are
That's
going to have a
that's
whole
my
topic
closing
on that.
argument. We're
Wait.
not raising Norman Bates babies. That's my closing argument.
Boom.
So let's get it together, people. Let's get it together.
All right, all right. I mean, we spent a lot of good time today talking about a lot of different forms of abuse. I like the comment that you made, Letitia, when you said that a lot of different things that people don't even think about as being considered as abuse
Yeah.
were things that we talked about today and covered, and it got pretty deep, right?
As expected.
Oh yeah, I mean that's what we came here for, though. In order to be able to enlighten everybody and have a good conversation about things that most people don't like to discuss. Those candid topics that affect us as people as a whole, but especially in our community, because we are definitely the stigma. We don't like to talk about. We never like to talk about stuff that's going on. We sweep everything under the rug. So. Everybody, make sure y'all come back and listen to us and talk to us again when we share some more candid conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's our time, y'all. Did you have any closing comments, Letitia or Nisi?
I just want to say, work on being better humans. You cannot raise good humans if you haven't achieved that yourself.
Facts.
I agree with that. Unfortunately, my dogs are killing me right now they keep passing gas and they are being cruel to me in this office. So I apologize because I had to stop my facial expression. So I had to turn off my camera, y'all. So I apologize. But yeah, work on you and work on the kids. It's the holistic approach. We got to work all together. So do that. Miss
Yeah.
D?
Okay.
Get some therapy. Stop frowning on therapy in the Black community. And it doesn't have to come in the form of a psychiatrist. I don't care what avenue you get therapy. The Black community needs therapy. We've got to stop associating mental illness to the crazy mentality that we don't want to address. We don't want to have to deal with the crazy brother, the crazy sibling. Get some therapy. You cannot raise a productive member of society if you yourself are broken, if you're dealing with generational curses or childhood trauma. So fix you before you start breeding kids.
Ain't that the truth? I'm thinking like educate yourself. You know what I mean? Because like we've talked about on here before, you don't know what you don't know. And there's nothing wrong with learning. We have to learn everything else in this life. There's parenting classes out there because just because you have kids doesn't make you a good parent. Spend some time with your kids outside of everybody on their phones or on their games. Spend time with your kids. Talk to your kids. That's the only way you're going to learn what type of little person you're dealing with. It gives you insight to who they are and helps you to be able to mold them into the type of person that they need to grow up to be.
Absolutely.
Agree. Great show, ladies.
Yes. Thank you all for coming out. We look forward to seeing you guys next week. And y'all have a good evening.
Good evening. Good
Good
night.
evening.
Guys.